All right, so let's talk about something pretty crazy, okay?
Okay.
Imagine you wake up, right?
Yeah.
You go grab your coffee, turn on the news, and it's like, Trump wins 2024 election.
Wow.
I mean, come on. It's like a political earthquake, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Shocking for a lot of people.
Totally. And the thing is, even those political experts, the ones who think they've seen it all, they're like, what just happened?
Right.
So today, we're going to do a deep dive into how this all went down. We found this in-depth analysis that breaks down 10 key factors that led to Trump's victory.
10 factors.
10. And get this, some of these are pretty wild, like stuff you wouldn't expect.
I'm intrigued. It's fascinating how these things all come together to create a result like this, right?
Totally. It's like a puzzle, and we're putting the pieces together. So this analysis kicks off with immigration. Always a hot topic, right?
Always. It's been simmering for years. But this election, it really boiled over.
It seems like a tipping point.
So what happened?
The Biden-Harris administration, they were dealing with a massive surge at the border. Record-breaking numbers, actually.
Really? How high are we talking?
Over 300,000 border crossings just in December 2023.
300,000 in 1 month.
Just in December. It created this overwhelming sense of crisis. And those images, migrant buses arriving in cities, tent cities popping up all over, it became really real for a lot of people.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Not just numbers on a page anymore.
Exactly. And it shifted public opinion in a big way, across party lines even. The analysis found 55% of Americans wanted to decrease immigration.
55%, that's a huge jump from just a few years ago.
Huge. Back in 2020, only 28% felt that way.
Wow. So how did Trump play this to his advantage?
Well, he was really clever about it. His campaign framed it as an economic threat and a security threat, all rolled into one.
Smart. Hitting on two major concerns.
Yeah. They basically argued that all this immigration was straining resources, driving down wages, and could even make the country less safe.
So they played on those deep-seated fears, the economic instability and the personal safety angle.
Right. And you know what's interesting?
What's that?
This message really resonated with legal immigrants.
Really? Why do you think that is?
I think it's about fairness. If you've done everything by the book, gone through the whole process to immigrate legally, it's got to be frustrating to see others bypassing the system.
Like cutting in line.
Exactly. And that breeds resentment. The Trump campaign tapped into that feeling, made it a big part of their story.
Interesting. All right, on to factor number 2. This one really surprised me, the Middle East.
Yeah, particularly Arab American voters.
Right. It looks like there was a huge swing in Michigan, a state with a lot of Arab American voters.
A huge swing, like in Dearborn, for example.
Dearborn. That's a big Arab American community, right?
It is. And they went from 70% for Biden in 2020 to only 42% for Trump in 2024.
Wow, that's like a complete flip. What happened there?
Well, Trump really pushed this idea of himself as a peacemaker in the Middle East. He played up his role in those peace deals during his first term.
That's kind of ironic, given some of his past policies, like the travel ban on Muslim-majority countries.
Yeah, a bit of a head-scratcher, right? But it seems like, at least for some voters, he was able to kind of rewrite that narrative.
Interesting.
There was also this feeling among some Arab American voters that Biden and Harris wouldn't really change U.S. policy in the Middle East.
So they went for a new approach, even if it came from an unexpected place.
Exactly. And don't forget, the Trump campaign was really strategic about reaching out to Muslim communities, making a big effort in places like Dearborn.
Every vote counts, right?
Yeah.
Especially in those key swing states.
Absolutely. Understanding those shifts, those local dynamics, can be the key to unlocking the bigger picture.
Okay, moving on to factor number 3, Trump's campaign style. I mean, the guy's a showman, right?
Definitely not your typical politician.
So how did he do it this time? How did he communicate his message?
He does this amazing blend of humor and, well, anger, But there's also this optimism mixed in there, and even some darkness. It's like political performance art.
I have to admit, it's captivating. Even when you disagree with him, you can't help but watch.
He knows how to connect with people. He taps into those cultural anxieties, makes people feel like he understands them.
Like he's one of them.
Exactly. And he's not afraid to bring in religious imagery and symbols. And that became even more prominent after the assassination attempt.
Yeah, that was a turning point, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That assassination attempt added this whole new layer of drama, Suddenly he was the survivor. the fighter who wouldn't back down, and that resonated with a lot of voters.
It played into this whole narrative of personal sacrifice.
For sure. And then there was the AI stuff, the AI-generated images.
Oh yeah, that was wild.
It was brilliant. It let him control the story, create these powerful visuals, and basically bypass the traditional media. We've never seen anything like it.
It's a whole new game. All right, we've just scratched the surface here, but we've got more to unpack. Let's move on to factors 4 and 5, where we'll look at some surprising demographic shifts and the impact of Trump's economic message. Okay, so we're back, diving deeper into these 10 factors that led to Trump's victory. Factor number 4, and this one's a real head-scratcher, demographic shifts.
Right, some real surprises in the data, like Trump actually made gains with Hispanic and Black voters.
Wait, seriously, I always thought those groups were solidly Democrat.
They usually are, but this time was different. Especially in urban areas, we saw a shift.
What do you think caused that?
Well, remember how we were talking about Trump's strategy with immigration and the economy?
Yeah, linking those two together.
It seems that message really hit home for working-class voters, no matter their race or ethnicity. Like, it went beyond identity politics.
So it's about bread and butter issues, the stuff that impacts everyone's wallet.
Exactly. Inflation, cost of living, jobs. These are the things on people's minds, and they felt like Trump was more in tune with those struggles than Biden and Harris.
So he tapped into that economic anxiety.
He did. And it wasn't just traditional voters either. He even pulled in some new groups, like those cryptocurrency folks and some of the countercultural youth.
They don't exactly fit the typical Republican mold, do they?
Not really, but Trump was brilliant at positioning himself as the outsider, the anti-establishment candidate.
Like he was sticking it to the system.
Exactly. And that message resonated with people who felt disillusioned with the whole political scene.
It's like he hacked the system by being outside of it.
That's a good way to put it. And he was smart about using social media and alternative media to get his message out, bypassing those traditional filters.
Reaching people directly on their own turf.
Right. Okay, so that's factor 4, those unexpected demographic shifts.
Got it. Now, factor number 5. Economic messaging. We've touched on this, but why is it so important on its own?
Because economic anxiety was a huge driving force in this election.
Yeah, I can see that. Everyone's feeling the pinch.
And Trump kept hammering on those issues, inflation, cost of living, things everyone was experiencing.
You can't ignore those issues, especially when you're the party in power.
Nope. And Trump was so good at framing those issues in a way that resonated with working-class voters. He painted himself as their champion, the one who understood their struggles.
This analysis also mentions he connected with small business owners and farmers. What was the appeal there, do you think?
I think they saw him as someone who gets it, someone who understands the challenges they face, especially when it comes to the economy and government regulations.
So they felt like he was on their side.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered immigration, the Arab American vote, Trump's campaign style, unexpected demographic shifts, and the power of economic messaging.
Wow, 5 down, 5 to go.
Yeah.
Ready for number 6.
Hit me with it.
All right, this one's a bit sensitive, cultural and identity politics.
Yeah, this is where we see Trump really solidifying his base and even expanding it. He knows how to tap into those cultural anxieties,
Right, appealing to people on an emotional level. But how did he turn that into actual votes?
Well, remember how we talked about him being the anti-establishment figure?
Yeah, the outsider.
He tapped into this deep distrust of institutions, of the elites. A lot of voters felt like the system was rigged against them, like no one was listening.
And Trump was the one who would shake things up.
Exactly. He was the disruptor. He also made a real effort to connect with religious voters, especially using Christian imagery and language.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that, particularly after the assassination attempt.
Right. That event played into this idea of him as a chosen figure, someone who is meant to lead.
It added this almost spiritual dimension to his campaign.
It did. The analysis also points out how he focused on education, what they call curriculum concerns.
What's that all about?
Well, there's been a growing concern, especially among parents, about what's being taught in schools. Topics like critical race theory and gender identity have become very political.
So a lot of people felt like their values weren't being respected.
Yeah, like schools were pushing an agenda they didn't agree with, and Trump capitalized on that. He positioned himself as a defender of traditional values, of parental rights in education.
So he gave a voice to those concerns. It's interesting how he was able to weave all these different cultural threads together.
He's really good at that, understanding and using those cultural anxieties to create this sense of shared identity, a common purpose for his supporters.
Okay, so we've talked about what Trump did right.
Right.
But what about the other side? Factor number 7, the weaknesses of the Harris campaign.
Yes. Let's talk about what went wrong for them.
Why couldn't they connect with voters in the same way?
Well, for one, they had a hard time separating themselves from the Biden administration's policies.
So they inherited all the baggage, even though they were trying to present a fresh start.
Exactly. And with the border crisis, inflation, and all that, it was a lot of baggage to carry. They also struggled to address those issues in a way that really resonated with voters. Their message just didn't seem to connect with people's everyday realities.
So it felt out of touch.
Kind of, yeah. And the analysis mentions their outreach to key demographic groups was weak.
What do they mean by that?
Well, it seems like they were trying to appeal to everyone, progressives and moderates. And in the process, their message got diluted. It didn't really inspire anyone.
So they tried to please everyone and ended up pleasing no one.
That's about right. And they didn't spend enough time on the ground in those crucial areas, those swing states. They weren't connecting with voters in a way that felt real and engaging.
So they were outmaneuvered, both with their message and with their ground game.
That's a tough combination to overcome. It let Trump set the agenda and gain momentum in those key states.
Okay, so we're wrapping up our deep dive into these 10 factors that led to Trump's victory. We've covered a lot of ground: immigration, economic anxiety, cultural messaging. But I'm really curious about this next one, factor number 8, the post-assassination attempt impact. It just feels like such a turning point.
It was. That event, even though it was unsuccessful, it really changed how people saw Trump.
Right. It made him a survivor, someone who wouldn't be silenced.
Exactly. And that really resonated with voters. It created this wave of sympathy and admiration.
I remember the media coverage. It was nonstop. The whole nation was on edge. Do you think it helped energize his base?
For sure, especially his religious supporters, For them, it reinforced this whole idea of divine protection. Like, surviving that attempt on his life was a sign he was meant to lead.
It just goes to show how powerful a single event can be.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to factor number 9, coalition building. This seems crucial. How did Trump expand his appeal beyond his core supporters?
Well, he knew he couldn't win with just his base, right? He needed to reach out to other groups, people who might not typically vote Republican, and he was really good at that.
The analysis mentions that he was able to connect with some traditionally Democratic voters. How did he pull that off?
Part of it goes back to what we talked about earlier, connecting with working class voters on those economic issues. But he also brought in some new faces, people who gave him a different kind of credibility with voters who might have been skeptical.
They specifically mention RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, they were big gets for him. They'd both been Democrats, so their support carried a lot of weight. They helped soften his image, made him more appealing to a wider audience.
It's like he was putting together this all-star team, pulling from all different sides.
Exactly. And it wasn't just limited to politics either. Remember his alliance with Elon Musk?
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
It was brilliant. Musk brings this whole tech-savvy, futuristic vibe, which really helped Trump's image.
So he was building bridges across party lines and across different sectors.
He was. And that brings us to the final factor, number 10, media and institutional dynamics.
This is where Trump really excels.
He's a master of the media game.
It's like he can turn any kind of coverage, even negative stuff, to his advantage.
He gets it. He knows controversy equals attention. And attention, good or bad, can be used to gain power.
Right. It just seems to fuel his supporters even more.
Exactly. Every time he gets criticized, every attack, it just reinforces their belief that he's a threat to the establishment, that he's on their side.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And he doesn't just play defense. He's really good at using alternative media, going around those traditional gatekeepers and speaking directly to his base.
Controlling the narrative, setting his own terms.
Right.
Well, this has been eye-opening. We've really gotten a clear picture of how this happened, this unexpected Trump victory. It's not just one thing, it's this complex mix of factors.
Definitely. It just shows how dynamic our political landscape is. Things are changing fast.
And to really understand what's going on, you have to dig deeper.
Absolutely. You can't just rely on the surface level stuff.
To our listeners, we encourage you to keep digging, keep asking questions, stay informed.
Yeah, engage in those tough conversations.
The future of our democracy depends on it.
It really does.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the 2024 election.
We hope that you enjoyed that episode. For interesting content like this, do subscribe to us, like us, and share with your friends. Thanks for listening in.